Okay, greetings everyone, and welcome back to the Amoda Maa podcast. As they like to say in America, it's been a bit. That means it's been a long time since we've done one. I think I can't even remember what the last one was, Amoda. So it's all gone. It's all in the past. Amoda's been to California. We did a short retreat, and we've both been very ill, yada yada. So we're pleased to be back, and we are going to have hopefully a juicy conversation today about Tantra and non-duality. But before I launch into the inquiry, I would like to say hello to Amoda and welcome her to her own podcast. Hello, Amoda.
Hi, Kavi.
Nice to see you again. It's been a bit.
Yes.
So, okay. So here's a little bit of not background, but why this has arisen. We, Amoda and I, are putting on 7-week meditation series, the Tantra of Life, starting in, I think it's June. I can't remember the date of it.
23.
June 23, and it's the third year we've put it on, and of the courses that we do, the programs that we do, this is one of the most juicy and kind of visceral, if you like, the meditation series. And so we were discussing this and talking about it and thought, Tantra and non-duality, what a great subject, what a great inquiry this will be. And so because Amoda's got experience of both, I have a little bit, but certainly Amoda has, so we thought we would open it up and have a discussion about Amoda's particular experience of Tantra and non-duality. Are they different? Are they the same? Within the context of non-dual teaching, where does Tantra sit? What is the relationship maybe between Tantra and non-duality? Are they in opposition? Which to some people they're in big opposition, I think, to others not so much. Are they in opposition, or are they possibly two sides of a coin? So we're going to open it up a little bit and see if we can shed some light on these hot words of Tantra and non-duality. Amoda, that was a rambling introduction to what we're going to dive into. So is there enough there to throw at you and to open the discussion up for exploration?
Absolutely. We can start the conversation with just looking at Tantra and non-duality from a let's call it conventional understanding, or even dare I say a mainstream understanding, because they do seem to be very different paths. When one says the tantric path, perhaps immediately it conjures up images and ideas and understandings and concepts about Tantra, usually as a sexual practice. Or something to do with the body, through the senses, through the chakras, through yogic practices, through, like I say, sexual practices, through breath practices. It seems to involve the physical form.
To reach enlightenment.
Yes, to reach enlightenment, to, yes, all of this higher consciousness, essentially to go beyond duality. But that's not the first thing that comes to mind, if you like, when one says Tantra. And then you, right? So then
Well, everything gets dumbed down eventually, doesn't it? Let's face it.
Well, yes, I put the word Tantra on one of our Facebook posts to circulate as an ad for promoting the Tantra course, and it got rejected by Facebook. That it was violating there. So even that already has built into it that it's something to do with sex. So I had to change the language. So that's how ridiculous it can get. But you know, let's for most people, even on a spiritual path, Tantra implies something to do with the physical form, with the senses, even with relationship, and so on and so on. And then, you know, what comes to mind with non-duality, again, on a sort of more mainstream, generalized understanding, non-duality is about recognizing or understanding that there's nobody here, the world is an illusion, I am not the body, only consciousness is real. And so it seems as if they are in opposition or two very different paths. The way that I have experienced it myself, and not by studying classical texts on Advaita or the Tantric way, but a deep immersion into both the Tantric way, but also the non-dual way. For me, really, that they weren't actually split into two in that sense, but I've come to see it and understand it from both sides of the coin, that actually they're not opposites. They're not really. They have slightly different approaches, but to me, in my direct experience and my understanding, the true essence of both ends up in exactly the same place. And that's why we're offering the tantric way of life, or the way of Tantra, the Tantra of life, as part of our teaching programs. So let's explore what that means. Why are they the same, end up in the same?
Yeah, so they have different gateways or pathways, if you like, if we need to use those terms. As we said at the beginning, two sides of a coin that is, you know, for want of a better term, enlightenment, freedom. You know, freedom from attachment, freedom from, or just freedom. So yeah.
Yes, well, they both essentially are about going beyond duality.
Yes.
Going beyond the divided state, going beyond I'm here as an individuation, as a finite entity, and then there is everything outside of me. It's going beyond that. It's going actually beyond consciousness or formlessness, the formless, being separate from form. And that's where the misunderstanding is. Yeah. It's as if Tantra points to form as the gateway to the formless. Yes, indeed. But it has a sticking point. And that sticking point is an attachment unconsciously to the form, the practice that uses the form to get to the formless being enlightenment or higher consciousness or expanded state of oneness and all of this. So then there is almost addiction to the practice that uses form, which is with the body, usually through sex,
But not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although very often, but not necessarily. Well, because it's working with the chakras and it's working with the senses and it's working with a sense of separation.
Yeah, we can actually explore that.
Polarities. Yeah.
Let's explore that a little bit later.
Okay.
Yeah, but yes. Yeah.
So there can be an attachment to that practice of the form as the gateway to the formless.
Yeah.
And then with a more non-dual approach, there can be an avoidance of form or a denial of form. That's because we're actually going directly to the realization of the formless consciousness, space, open awareness as the source, or the constant that is always here, even when form comes and goes. And those can be two sticking points. Now, my personal understanding through my personal experience of awakening, through the many practices that I've been immersed in, and through the teaching that's come from that, is that going beyond duality is the collapse of me and everything out there. It's the collapse of consciousness and form being separate, or formless and form being separate. It's the understanding and the realization, the energetic, visceral, known, experiential, understanding that all form arises within the formless as an expression of the formless. So they're not separate. So to say there's nobody here or the world is an illusion is in some ways misleading. It's not the whole story, and sets up this kind of denial of the world of form. The thing with Tantra, or the tantric way, it's not so much about tantric practices.
Yes.
I'm really not interested in those as such, because that's where the stickiness is. But actually, the tantric way of life, the tantra of life, is really an energetic opening and intimacy with all things. When that intimacy with all things is a lived experience, then really there's no me and other, or me and things, or me and life, or me and God even, or even me and consciousness. They all collapse into one. So it's the end of separation. And then it's as if the source of all things, the ground of all things, which is consciousness, space, open awareness, the light of beingness, the I amness, or even prior to that, just this, the isness, permeates all things, permeates all things, and all things are impermanent, but this source is permanent, but they're not separate. So this brings a great intimacy and with life itself that doesn't deny anything, neither does it derive its identity from those things. So that is non-dual. That's the non-dual realization.
So
Tantra,
would it be?
Sorry.
Would it be? I like things to be wrapped up quite a lot in nice chunk-sized sentences. And is it fair to say, on a certain level, that the tantra of life, as you're talking about it, not the tantric practices, but the tantra of life in the way that you described, is the living expression, the living of non-dual realization.
That's a very beautiful way to say it. And actually it is. Yes.
Isn't it? Yeah.
And yeah. And actually that was my doorway to awakening. Yeah. It wasn't through the non-dual understanding, but it was through I didn't even know it was tantric at the time, but it was for the full immersion, it's almost like it's so intimate. It's as if you die into everything. Yeah. And in that, there is this non-dual realization. You wake up out of separation. You wake up out of the dream. You wake up out of the identity with everything or some things or whatever appears. It's a merging.
It is a merging. Yes.
It's like a merging into the totality. It's a merging into godness that actually releases the attachment to things. Yeah. Because all things are temporary appearances, reflections of that one totality that is formless and yet includes all forms. And it is fundamentally a shift in perception. A shift in perception. And that shift brings a soft gaze to the experience of life. Yeah, which we could say that's non-dual, a soft gaze. We stop being fixated. But it's also tantric in the sense that many of the tantric practices and the meditations and the contemplations, less the practices that use form, but the contemplations are about softening the gaze. Yeah. So yes, it's through the portal of the senses, because that's how that's the only way we can know things. Yeah. The many appearances, we can only know the many appearances through the senses. There's no other way of knowing them. So it is through the doorway of the senses, which includes the gaze, upon things, that we either get fixated on those things, and in being fixated we're either grasping or rejecting. But when the gaze is very soft, literally and energetically, it's like an inner gaze as well as an outer gaze. It's as if that very narrow, myopic fixation comes undone. And we see through the unbounded infinity of the heart, the one heart, the heart of all things. Oh, that's non-dual as well. It's the end of duality.
It is. Can I ask it then about non-duality? Because now you've pointed to the heart. Now you've pointed to the sensing experience of this three-dimensional world, which, as you pointed out earlier, is kind of can be denied to a certain extent in the non-dual, modern, contemporary, whatever, seeker, who can almost deny the visceralness, or not just, in a way, hope or assume that the understanding is enough. It's not. Historically, it never really has been enough. But in order to do what you said, softening the gaze, opening the senses, if you like, and then undefending the heart, these things bring up intimacy for people, and intimacy is notoriously troublesome to the self, because it brings up vulnerability, it brings up fear, it brings up all of the kind of potentially cathartic areas of life. Is that necessary? Is it necessary to go through that, to embrace those? What I'm seeing is, what's the point? If you can understand it, with a icon, and we meet a lot of people who can actually get it, understand it. But is it coming through? Is it being lived? Is it being lived in?
No, it all has to be included. Yes, the non-dual understanding, because it can be pointed to, awareness, consciousness, the ground of being. We can point to it. It can be seen. It can be recognized in all circumstances or in meditations and so on. But unless it includes everything that appears in that, which it's going to, repressed emotions or suppressed emotions, what hasn't been met, that's the living the truth of non-duality. There's the non-dual understanding, if you like, or recognition, but then that recognition has to filter into the whole being, and that becomes tantric. So an understanding of what Tantra is, which is essentially welcoming everything into the spaciousness of being. When I say heart, that's really what I mean. Heart is the doorway to the spaciousness of being. But rather than going straight to the spaciousness of being and pointing to that, which is a very sort of non-dual approach, it's to include everything within that. So emptiness and fullness are one, and that requires or invites this soft gaze. When I say soft gaze, I don't mean just through the eyes, but through the whole being, through the whole self, on all levels. A softness, a welcomingness, and that includes any emotions that arise, any sensations that arise, vulnerability, and something that feels a little bit dark or scary, or in terms of an emotional, energetic experience. All energies must be met with a soft gaze, and then the non-dual understanding can penetrate, can filter in and be lived. If you like, for me, it was the other way around. It was the tantric way first. And then in that, the non-dual realization came.
When you say the tantric way, what? Let's just drill in a little bit. I don't like that expression. I'm throwing that out.
What, drill in?
When you're so horrible expression. I'm not a dentist. When you say the
tantric way,
the tantric way, what are you kind of talking about for yourself in the early days, or whenever you're, give us a kind of flavor of, because I know you and I, when I met you and we embarked on a tantric program but I think that you're talking about kind of something else.
I think I've just said it. The tantric way, which is the way that I was on, just as a way of life, is to allow and welcome everything, to say yes. Nothing is excluded. No emotion, no, any inner landscape one might experience. It could be melancholy. That was a very frequent one for me. It could be aloneness. It could be meaninglessness. I mean, for others, it may be sadness. It could be anger. Whatever it is, none of it is out of bounds. None of it is to be rejected. There's a soft gaze upon it all. It doesn't mean that I am that. It means that it just appears, just like the weather appears. But the weather is just as real as the sky, but it's not permanent. Therefore, my soft gaze upon it, which is intimate, it's tender, it's not rejecting, it's not violent, it's not dividing myself from that, is the transformation itself. That's what I discovered. It transforms everything into the spaciousness of being, because nothing in the world of form in the world of finite form, because it is finite, lasts. It always changes, just as the weather changes from storm to rain to cloud to wind to sun. It's always changing, but its essence is the same. Yeah.
Oh my God, I could ask you a million questions. Did you, the path of surrender?
That's what it is, yes.
So for you as a woman, I know I don't want to get into this business too much, but as a woman, you're talking about the path of surrender that arrived in your life first. And then the path of surrender, in which you've just so eloquently spoken to and about, then led you to the realization and a particular experience that of what now is described as the non-dual realization. Is that significant? Because now your teaching is this your teaching we're talking about, essentially,
right.
Isn't it? The path of surrender and the realization of the non-dual truth. But if you had come, let's say, to the non-dual realization without having all of that tantric, the path of surrender, then what? I wonder. I know it's hypothetical, but is it significant that this has happened to you? Yeah, for the quality of, for the depth, for the holisticness of your teaching.
Most likely, I can't absolutely say, but as you speak, and a sort of little sense of what it would have been like if I had been somehow on my path, been pointing, not myself, but being pointed to either through what I was reading or through other teachers or whatever, to the awareness of awareness, solely as that, then what comes is a sense of being disembodied.
Yes.
Now,
I'd say that's because you're a woman.
Oh, possibly, yes. Yes, possibly, yes, absolutely. There is that. But I mean, I was steeped in meditation.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And that meditation was Zen.
Yeah.
And in that Zen, there is only awareness, the realization of awareness, being aware, and all experiences within that, thoughts, feelings, emotions, would be swinging within that. So that, yeah, but in that Zen, there's no movement and only the awareness of the movement. So that is non-dual as well. So it was both. You see, Tantra is intimacy and awareness. It's not just intimacy. It's not just losing yourself in things, in experiences, in emotions, or in relationship. It's not just that. It's that with awareness. Awareness is the still point within that. Awareness is the one that does not move. Awareness perhaps is Shiva. And Devi is asking him, how can I realize that? How can I realize that? And he offers her, through these tantric meditations, doorways in the everyday life, through the breath, through the movement, through the mundane, through the profane, doorways to this realization. So it is non-dual. It is awareness. And my experience, and I'm not a great student of classical texts or scriptures, that's not where I've come from, but my some understanding and knowledge that I have of the Vigyana of Tantra, which is the text of the 112 tantric meditations that were originally given from Shiva to Devi, which are the two aspects of male and female, are not just body-centered.
No. No.
There are many meditations in there that point to awareness. Yeah. And what comes and goes, and not being identified with that. And I think those are, in some ways, unknown, lesser known meditations. When I have dived into, to some degree, that text, I was surprised and rather heartened by the fact that these are not just a series of tantric movement, sexual relationship, masculine, feminine type practices. Some, yes, but not all. Many of them are focused on seeing the world come and go.
Yeah.
Seeing the body come and go.
Yeah.
Meditations on death, impermanence, awareness, sky nature. Well, in some ways, they're Zen practices, if we want to call them that. So it all kind of merges into one, because ultimately that's what it's about, the realization of who I am, what I am. But that doesn't deny the form. And where the tantric way, if you like, becomes valuable in everyday life, or on the path of seeking freedom or self-realization or enlightenment, is that place that you mentioned, Kavi, which is where non-dual realization, or the awareness of awareness, filters in to the lived experience. So that's where an inner transformation takes place. And especially in the context of how to be with difficult emotions, because that's the challenge for many people on a spiritual path, or not on a spiritual path, is how to be with difficult emotions, because there is so much suppression and rejection and denial and bypassing and fixing and all of that goes on in ordinary life and on the spiritual path. It's the same. So the tantric way, the tantric approach, and understanding that energetically, viscerally, as a lived experience, is valuable in that, because that's the only way that which appears to be so unwelcome, that which appears to be a threat, that which has been suppressed but now wants to appear because everything wants to come home. That's the only way that can be transformed into the light of beingness. Yeah, and then there's therapy and self-help and positive thinking and all of that, which is still trying to fix it, change it, and that doesn't work. So this tantric way, if we really understand it and practice it and live it, not through the textbook, but through the lived experience, which I hope is what we're offering. A gateway, a doorway, an invitation, a taste of that. We call it a series of meditations, but it's not really that. It's an invitation and a teaching within that, just using a meditation, a particular specific one, as the foundation for it. Yeah. And then a discourse and an exploration and an inquiry into how this is lived. What does that mean? It's not just a practice. How is it lived? This changes everything.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, this is the non-dual, the living of non-dual freedom, awakening in the midst of everyday life. It's the end of suffering.
I can't speak more highly of what you just said. In my humble experience, what you just said is absolutely on the button. Really, it really is, because it's that path of, as any awareness filters in, the path of saying yes to it, the path of saying yes, softening those hard edges. How else do we do it? Because it can't, a non-dual understanding, awareness cannot remain separate from the lived experience. It just can't, because it doesn't do any service. Just retains itself as an understanding, and then it gets met and challenged by the everyday life. And so it has to be met consciously, softly. And the other thing that I was animated by what you were saying was that the misunderstanding or the marginalizing of this tantra of life into this human obsession with sex, you know, and just, oh, well, that's it, you know, let's send it down that road of either I'm obsessed with it or I'm not obsessed with it, and I'm secretly obsessed with it. And to corral the vastness of this the tantra of life into this tiny little channel of sexual obsession is puerile on a certain level. I mean, it works for some. I know there are some major practices out there that do that, and fair play. But for everybody to just jump to this knee-jerk reaction that when we talk of anybody talks of the tantra of life, they're just somehow talking about this sex thing is idiotic. It's ridiculous, and this blows a hole in that, because it is much vaster. Yes. It's a vast way of being in the world that doesn't deny the world, says yes to it all. In order to find God, you must welcome everything. And that was Tagore. And I don't know whether he was a tantric teacher, but that's a tantric statement.
It is. And the the paradox, as always, there's a paradox, is that when you say yes to everything, it's as if the world disappears in you, in the sense that it disappears, it comes home, it dissolves, into the spaciousness of being that you are, which means that you're no longer tormented by the world, attached to the world, deriving your identity from the world, trying to control the world. And when I say the world, that means everything that's part of your life and your experience and so on. You're not defined by the world, or defined even by your experience of your life. Whereas in the unconscious state, let's say, that's where one is identified from that. And that's a source of torment, source of suffering, a source of agitation, and so on. But it all just dissolves into that which you are essentially, which is the sky, which is the open awareness. That's where it becomes non-dual. So it's not an attachment to the sensorial ecstasy of, let's say, some of these more conventional tantric practices, where there is often a sort of, well, let's say, an attachment to, or an addiction to, or a reliance on that ecstatic expansion.
Ah, yes, ecstatic.
Which whether that's dance, or whether that's breath work, or whether that's tantric sex practices, yes, beautiful, and it can give us a sense of something beyond this boundary, but it doesn't end there. It begins there, and when it begins there and goes through that, you go beyond duality, and actually that tool, or that method, or that form falls away. You don't need to dance to feel ecstatic. You don't need to have a tantric sexual interaction, breath work, meditation in order to feel expanded into the oneness. Yeah, you don't need any of that, because you are that. Yeah. And it stops being ecstatic, it becomes ordinary. But that ordinariness is the living of the non-dual freedom. Yeah, you're not defined by any of that.
Yeah. It is a, I mean, dare I say, a treacherous, both paths, all paths are treacherous. I think we could establish that. Yeah, because of the tendency on the path that you're talking about to become hooked on the on the boat that gets you to the shore, and a little less interested in just hanging out on the shore because there might not be anything there or something. So you get attached to that. And as you said at the beginning, you know, there's a tendency, or there can be, of dissociation in the non-dual realization when it doesn't enter, you know, in this kind of way. So yes, what you just said is absolutely right. Is this, if I were to say to you, to be in the world but not of the world?
That's right. That's
is that
right.
it?
That's it. You're in the world, absolutely intimate with what is appearing. There's no denial. There's no rejection. There's no resistance, whatever experience it is. And that experience is perceptual, sensorial, emotional, energetic, direct felt sense. This is your experience. It's absolutely intimate. And in that intimacy, what happens in intimacy in that way, you're not standing back, labeling it, naming it, interpreting it. It's so intimate that it's just this. Yeah, we can't put a name to it unless we need to functionally. Oh, that's a cup, I'm going to pick it up. But, you know, it's just all right here. But that intimacy, yeah, which is you're in the world and the world is in you, yeah, but you're not of it. You're not, your sense of identity, who you are, what you are, is not derived from that. Yeah. So then if it's what we might call, and here we're naming it, but we have to just for this conversation, something that you might name if you stood back as unwanted, difficult emotion, yeah, loss, maybe we can, all relate to that, or sense of aloneness or solitude, yeah. Or it might be something ecstatic, very pleasurable, uplifting. You're not deriving your sense of self from either of those. That's not who you are. That's not what you are. Because all of that comes and goes. All of that is finite, impermanent, and is an appearance of the one appearing as a separate, finite thing. But it's not. It's still an appearance within, yeah? So it's duality within non-duality. Yeah, but we're not deriving our identity from it. So it's intimate. Yeah, just as the sky is intimate with the weather, then they don't seem to be separate. And sky over there and weather over there. The weather is an appearance of sky. But sky itself, sky nature, never changes. Yeah, so it
I can see why it's almost easier to try and escape the world through the detachment of non-dual realization or understanding, whichever one, because actually the world and its vicissitudes and its emotions and its triggers and its hotspots is treacherous.
Everything is treacherous.
And so, well, it is. It's treacherous to the self, and the self is, you know, is almost the thing that has to navigate itself through the marketplace. And so there are many who get caught in that. Well, I've seen this, I see that, and I understand, I actually get it, you know, sort of thing. and then there's the aversion to the world. As the biggest questions we get are, how do I do that? Have you got any tips? Or what is the answer to this bit? Or, this bit has triggered me and I don't know what to do. We kind of have that a lot because it's the salient point, because actually the biggest dilemma is not the non-dual realization. The biggest dilemma is, how does that convert? How does that become the lived experience? And there's no avoiding it. That's the thing. You can transcend all you like and stay in the cave, but at some point, I remember the story, the guy who's in India 15 years got his visa, and he found bliss in the meditation cave, and then his visa ran out and he had to go back to the passport office, and in the passport office they closed the door on him really early and he hit the roof and he freaked out. And that's 15 years of meditation. Was it lost? I don't know. It's a tantric experience of going into the world. How does this become a kind of lived experience? And so that's what I see. That's what I'm affirming is the value of paying attention to this, of living this. And it can be called the tantric, the tantric way. It can be called the tantric way because it gives it a flavor, that way of softening into life and allowing life to soften into us, so that this whole idea of separate, the rigid separate self, kind of starts to melt. Really,
I think if one actually really looks into non-dual teachings, especially as they're offered in the contemporary world. I'm not talking so much about Advaita, perhaps. The classical Advaita. But if we look at more contemporary non-dual teachers, which may have arisen out of Advaita or end up in Advaita, but let's say the more contemporary non-dual teachings, if you really, really look into them, most of them do have a deep knowing understanding of this inclusion that we're talking about. Yes. They may not directly speak to it. What happens is that individuals on the path who come into those non-dual teachings, that's where the sticking place is. That's where the misunderstanding usually is, because there'll be a glimpse and then they'll get stuck in that glimpse and the denial of the rest of it. But if you actually go to if we could call it the source, or of those non-dual teachings, as in the one who is offering them, their lived experience, I would say, is tantric. Most of them, not all. There are some extreme non-dualists. And even then, I would say that in their actual personal lived experience, it's inclusive. It's just that what's portrayed or presented through the teachings can tend to be one-sided. And that's where the sticking point is.
Yeah.
Why that is, I don't really know. It becomes a thing. It becomes, in some ways, it's easier to talk, to speak
that's what
of that very clear-cut, non-dual knowing, understanding, recognition, and not including the human experience, because it gets quite nuanced, complex, treacherous, yes, to actually be able to speak to that in a clear and valuable way. Now, again, not so. All of that is part of it, and then the tantric way tends not to be so prominent or prevalent, because that also has its problems. As we said, you just mention the word tantra and suddenly there's this idea of what it is and what it's not, and blah blah. So perhaps this conversation is valuable in bringing it all together and going deeper than the surface understanding or the surface meaning of those terminologies.
Yes, I think you're very generous and in a good way to the non-dual scene, if you like. I do, because I think you're right. I think that there's a truth in what you're saying, and it becomes the easiest conversation in a sense. Is, you know, human beings like to talk and like to debate and like to understand. The idea, in a way, that understanding, and it does get us a long way, but understanding is it itself can end up being the boat that gets you to the shore. And then so you're still stuck on the boat, or the boat of understanding. There's the boat of the body, and there's the boat of understanding. If I just understand a little more, I'll get it, and then I'll be able to get to the shore. And so this kind of, the path of understanding is, while beautiful, is also treacherous.
I mean, you know, if anything or anyone or any sort of vibration or frequency of or fragrance of a teaching has penetrated me and my life, then it would be Osho. Not that he spoke directly of non-duality. I never heard him say the word non-dual. He spoke of awareness, he spoke of meditation, but he spoke of love. He spoke of Tantra, he spoke of all of it. And all of it was about transcendence, if you like, transcendence of the human condition of the unconscious state, and so on and so on. But the whole essence of it, even though it didn't use conventional spiritual language, was transcendence through allowing everything. Yeah, allowing everything. Emotions, energies, experiences. So it's the merging of love, not the love of another, but simply love. The unconditional acceptance of what is, but with awareness, with stillness. So that brings a non-attachment to appearances, to things, to others, to ideas, to concepts, to the self. But he didn't speak in non-dual terms as such. And yet that merging of what I know or understand to be the tantric way, the yes to life, the yes to what is. Nothing is in some ways higher or lower. And this pristine awareness that doesn't move. The world comes and goes within that. That kind of, it's not an understanding, but that energetic, I don't know what to call it, fragrance, frequency, which I was immersed in for quite some time. I think that's what did it, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, certainly my limited experience of the active meditations of Osho's, the dynamic, the Kundalini, you know, and the more peripheral ones that had some catharsis in them, you know, that had wildness in them, that had freedom, that had, emptying, shaking up and emptying. And I was a novice in those days, in many ways, not with Osho, but, you know, later. And my experience of that was extraordinary, the active meditations, because they're tantric. They're tantric in the sense of, you know, the body, using the body, but always ending up in the utter silence this meditation, which I have to say, he was some kind of genius who knew that at least the Western psyche needed to be shaken up, needed to cathart, needed an environment where it could scream and wail or whatever it was, you know, or dance or fling oneself about, but then held in the bowl, because then, and there would be this silence, and it was the most effortless, exquisite meditation of union, of awareness and knowing of union, that any meditation ever got me to. And it was just effortless. It was just there. It was there. I hadn't been there. It was there waiting for me. And that was an exquisite experience for me, you know, for getting that. And that's to me, that's Tantra. That was that particular expression of Tantra.
I think we could also say that the tantric way, or the Tantra of life, is the end of resistance to what is.
Yeah.
Tantra is about, either through softening the gaze or, you know, movement, chaotic movement, letting go, or whatever it might be, or is about dissolving the boundary between the defended me, which can either be a physical defended me, an emotional defended me, a psychological, mental defended me, and what appears in my experience. It's ending that boundary. So it's the end of resistance.
Yeah.
So these practices, some of them, are designed to dissolve that boundary somewhat energetically. But then it doesn't stop there. Then we live as that. Yeah, we bring that into everything. And that is the path of surrender. Yes. Surrender to what is. It's the surrender of the mind, the grasping mind or the grasping self that says, no, this can't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. It mustn't be happening. Well, it is. It is. Yeah, so this softens the whole gaze on all levels, the way of being.
Excellent. That's very beautiful. I would also say that, you know, in relational terms, to bring it back to the everyday, you know, I believe that you and I have a extraordinary non-dual tantric relationship. That's my best way of kind of describing what happens with you and I, because there's obviously, you know, it's steeped in a surrender, it's steeped in non-resistance, but it also is, you know, is for me anyway, for the I don't know, a lived non-dual awareness. I mean, here we are, we love each other with in an unlimited kind of way, knowing that each form is destined to dissolve, and that we have to meet that, we have to face that, and we do face that with a loving tear in the eye, knowing that we're temporary, that this moment is temporary, that this podcast is temporary, that this relationship has a fragrance in eternity, but as the two beings that we are, it's already toast in that sense. And if that's not a tantric way, then I don't really know what is.
Yes, it's not the tantra of ecstasy or needing to practice anything in order to feel a union with each other. It's the end. That's why it's non-dual. It's the end of needing to do something in order to feel oneness or union. Oneness, there is no union, because it's already one. It's already one prior to the two forms appearing. And when the two forms stop appearing, it's already that. So it's not the oneness of two forms trying to feel oneness with each other. There is nothing but the one. And within that one, there's an appearance, which I might name, Kavi, to make it easier to operate in this world. And there's an appearance called Amoda, which we'll call her that in order to be able to operate in this world. But essentially, they're just appearances, temporary, dancing, moving within the one. So I don't need to feel oneness or union with anything because I'm never separate from that. You, as an appearance, appear in me. Me, as an appearance, appears in you. And all of it is the one. So in that sense, it's tantric and non-dual. And the surrender is not to each other.
Yeah.
Very often that's the idea of Tantra in relationship, that somebody surrenders to somebody. We're not surrendering to anybody. This has nothing to do with the form. It's about the realization that all forms appear in the one, dancing in eternity until the dance stops. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not surrender to, it's surrender of. It's all, this is, and love is such a thing, my dear. That's, love is made of such things. This is why it is so exquisite. And with that, I think we are drawn this conversation to a close, correct?
Correct.
We'll be putting this out, this podcast, which has been an absolute delight. And I have missed them for the last month or so, whatever time it has been, because it's always such a pleasure talking with you in this way. And we'll be putting this podcast out. If you're interested in jumping onto the Tantra meditation program, I highly recommend it. You'll find it through Amoda's website, www.amodamaa.com. Go to events and you'll find it there somewhere. Otherwise, nothing more to say from us. We bid you adieu, farewell, and thank you for listening to our conversation. And we hope to see you again. I will definitely not be so long before the next juicy deep dive. I'll see to it. I'll make sure. Crack the whip. All right, Amoda.
All
thank
right,
you so
beautiful.
much.
Thank you.
I'll see you downstairs, of course, as our cliches go. And I'm a bit bored with that one. I'll see you everywhere.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Yeah. Take care, everyone, and be well. Look after yourself. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Namaste. Thanks for watching. If you like these videos with Amoda Maa, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to be notified of future videos, press the notification bell. It helps Amoda's channel and spreads the message. Thanks again, and see you next time. Bye-bye.